At my grandson's christening, I handed my daughter a small wooden box I carved myself. She opened it in front of everyone, pulled out the folded deed inside, and laughed. "A piece of paper, Mom? Seriously?" Her husband, Blake, leaned over and smirked. "What is it, some kind of coupon?" He turned to his mother. "Her mom sews clothes for a living. What did you expect?" My daughter tossed the box onto the dessert table like it was a napkin. I watched the deed to 70 acres of Tennessee farmland worth more than their house, their cars, and their bank accounts combined, slide across the tablecloth and knock over a glass of sparkling cider. Nobody picked it up. I did. I wiped the cider off the paper, folded it carefully, and put it back in the box. Then I walked out of the reception hall into the October cold, holding 34 years of my life in both hands, and I made a decision. Hey, pause. Before we go further, have you ever given someone everything you had and watched them treat it like nothing? Drop a comment. I read every single one. And hit subscribe if you want more stories like this one. Some details are fictionalized for storytelling, but the lesson is completely real. Now let me tell you what happened after I walked out of that christening. The reception hall was at the Monarch Grand in Knoxville. White columns, crystal chandeliers, 200 guests eating filet mignon at $150 a plate. My daughter, Jocelyn, had insisted on it. She said she wanted her son's christening to feel like an arrival. Her words. An arrival. Into what? I never understood. But Blake's family, the Delacroix family, had money, or at least the appearance of it, and Jocelyn had spent the last 3 years trying to prove she belonged in their world. I'd driven 4 hours from my little house in Polk County to be here. I wore the navy dress I'd made myself, the one with the white collar. My hands were rough from decades of sewing, alterations, bridal gowns, curtains, upholstery, anything people needed stitched. I ran my business out of my living room. A sign on my porch read, "Marguerite's Alterations, Walk-ins Welcome." I charged $12 to hem a pair of pants. I'd been charging $12 since 2004. That's what my daughter saw when she looked at me, $12 hems. What she didn't see was what I'd done with those $12, and the $50 gowns, and the $300 wedding dresses, and the $600 furniture reupholstery jobs. For 34 years straight. That night, back in my kitchen in Polk County, I set the wooden box on the table. The carved lid was still damp from the cider. I'd spent 3 weeks making that box, hand-cut dovetail joints, cherry wood. I'd dried myself, sanded smooth as glass. Jocelyn hadn't even noticed the craftsmanship. She'd only seen that it wasn't wrapped in designer paper. I opened the box and looked at the deed inside, 70 acres of bottomland along the Hiwassee River. I'd bought it in 2003 for $11,000 from a widow named Ruth Keller who was moving to Florida. Everyone said the land was worthless. Too far from the highway, too prone to flooding, no commercial value. I bought it because I saw what nobody else did. Rich soil, clean water, privacy, and a county government that was about to rezone the entire corridor for mixed-use development. That land was now appraised at $2.4 million. But that was just the 70 acres. It wasn't the whole picture. I walked to my bedroom closet and knelt on the hardwood floor. Pulled up the loose board, same hiding spot since 1996. Underneath was a fireproof lockbox I bought at a farm supply auction for $15. I opened it. Inside, 23 property deeds, a brokerage account statement from Vanguard, a savings account passbook from Farmers and Merchants Credit Union, and a manila envelope labeled J Trust in my handwriting. 23 properties. Mostly small duplexes, single-family rentals, a 4-unit building in Cleveland, Tennessee that I bought out of foreclosure and renovated myself. Total portfolio value, last time my accountant ran the numbers, $14 million. Cash and investments on top of that, another $3 million. I am a 63-year-old seamstress who lives in a 1,200-square-foot house with a cat named Buttons and a sewing machine older than my daughter. I drive a 2011 Honda Civic. I buy my groceries at Aldi. I go to bed at 9 and wake at 5. And I am worth $17 million. I never told Jocelyn because I wanted her to see me, really see me, before she saw the money. I wanted her to understand that the woman who sewed patches on her jeans in middle school, who altered prom dresses for her friends for free, who sat behind a Singer sewing machine 16 hours a day so Jocelyn could go to college without loans, that woman deserved respect. Not because of a bank balance, because of the work. But Jocelyn didn't see the work. She saw the $12 hems and felt shame. That night, I opened the manila envelope labeled J Trust. Inside was the paperwork for a trust fund I'd set up in 2018. $1.8 million, earmarked for Jocelyn and her future children. I planned to tell her about it at the christening, to hand her the box and explain everything. The land, the properties, the trust, all of it. The wooden box was supposed to be the beginning of a conversation. Instead, it became the end of one. I put the trust documents back in the lockbox. I wasn't angry. I was something worse. I was clear. The next morning, I called Dale Furman. Dale had been my real estate attorney for 20 years. He'd helped me buy my first rental property in 1998. A rundown duplex on Elm Street that I purchased for $22,000 and renovated with my own hands. He'd watched me build everything since. Marguerite, what can I do for you? I need to freeze the trust I set up for Jocelyn. No disbursements until further notice. A pause. You sure about that? Unsure. And I need one more thing. I want a full background check on Blake Delacroix. Financial records, business filings, everything. Another pause. May I ask why? Because my daughter married a man who thinks a seamstress is beneath him. I want to know what he's hiding. Men who look down on honest work usually have a reason. Dale didn't argue. He'd known me long enough to understand that when I spoke quietly, I meant every word. 3 days later, Dale called back. Marguerite, you're going to want to sit down. I was already sitting. I was always sitting. At my sewing machine, stitching a set of dining room chair covers for a client in Athens. The fabric was Italian, a deep burgundy damask. My hands didn't stop moving while Dale talked. Blake Delacroix doesn't work in private equity. He hasn't worked in private equity for 14 months. He was fired from Ridgeline Capital for unauthorized trading. They didn't press charges because his father made a donation to the firm's charitable fund. $200,000 to make the problem go away. My needle pierced the fabric. In, out, steady. Since then, he's been running what looks like a Ponzi scheme. He's been telling investors, mostly elderly clients from his church, that he's managing a real estate fund called Delacroix Heritage Partners. He's collected roughly $600,000. But there's no fund. The money goes into his personal account. He pays early investors with money from new investors. How long before it collapses? Based on the cash flow, 3 to 4 months, maybe less. And Jocelyn? Her name's nowhere on the business filings. She's not a signatory on any of the accounts. As far as I can tell, she doesn't know. I finished a stitch, cut the thread, and set the fabric aside. Dale, I need you to do 2 things. First, compile everything into a file and send it to the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation. Anonymous tip. Second, I want to schedule a meeting. 3 weeks from now. Sunday afternoon. At the farmland on the Hiwassee. The 70 acres? Why there? Because that's where this started. That's where it's going to end. Who's coming to this meeting? Everyone. I kept sewing. That week, I finished the chair covers, hemmed 6 pairs of pants, altered 2 bridesmaid dresses, and reupholstered a love seat for a couple in Ottawa. My clients came and went through my front door, wiping their boots on the mat, sitting in the waiting chair by the window while I pinned and measured. None of them knew that the woman on her knees with a mouthful of pins owned the building they were sitting in, and the one next door, and the vacant lot across the street where I was planning to build 4 affordable housing units. Jocelyn called 9 times in the first week after the christening. I let every call go to voicemail. Voicemail 1, Mom, I know you're upset about the box thing. I didn't mean to hurt your feelings. Call me back. Voicemail 4, Mom, please. Blake says you're overreacting. He says it was just a misunderstanding. Voicemail 7, Something weird is happening. Blake's been on the phone constantly. He's locked his office door. He snapped at me when I asked about our savings account. Mom, I'm worried. Voicemail 9. Mom, I got a letter from someone, an investor. They're asking about their money. What money? Blake won't answer me. Mom, please call me. I don't know what's going on. I listened to every voicemail. I didn't call back. Not yet. She wasn't ready to hear what I had to say. She'd defend him. She'd say I was jealous, that I never liked Blake, that I was trying to sabotage her marriage because I couldn't accept that she'd moved beyond Polk County. She had to see the truth herself. 2 weeks before the meeting, I drove out to the Hiwassee property. I hadn't been there in a month. The October leaves were turning, red and gold along the riverbank, the water low and clear over the rocks. I walked the fence line, same as I did every season. Checked the posts, looked for erosion, counted the wild turkeys crossing the north meadow. This land had been my first real investment. $11,000 in 2003. Every penny earned at my sewing machine. People laughed. What's a seamstress going to do with 70 acres of mud? I planted timber on 20 acres, white oak and tulip poplar. I leased 30 acres to a local organic farmer. I kept the remaining 20 wild, let the river do what rivers do. The timber alone was now worth $900,000. The agricultural lease generated $32,000 a year. But I wasn't here to count money. I was here to prepare. I called my contractor, Dennis Webb. Dennis, I need a clearing done on the south parcel. Half acre, near the river bend. Grade it flat, put down gravel, set up a temporary shelter, just a roof and posts, enough for a dozen people. When do you need it? 2 weeks. What's it for? A family gathering. Dennis didn't ask more questions. He'd built 3 of my rental properties. He knew I paid on time and meant what I said. The Sunday arrived cold and bright. I was at the property by noon, 2 hours early. Dennis had done good work. The gravel pad was level, the shelter was sturdy, and he'd even strung lights along the posts. It looked like a place where something important was about to happen. Because it was. I set up a folding table and placed the wooden box at the center. The same cherrywood box Jocelyn had tossed aside at the christening. I'd polished it until it gleamed. At 1:45, Dale Furman arrived with a briefcase. He shook my hand and sat up at one end of the table. At 1:50, a gray sedan pulled in. 2 people got out. A man and a woman in dark suits. TBI agents. Special Agent Richard Campos and Agent Diane Hutchins. Dale had coordinated with them after submitting the anonymous tip. The evidence was solid enough that they'd opened a formal investigation. They'd agreed to be present today, not to arrest, not yet, but to observe, and to act if necessary. At 1:55, Jocelyn's SUV came down the dirt road. She parked and got out slowly. She looked thin, tired. She was wearing jeans and a flannel shirt I recognized. One I'd made for her birthday 5 years ago. She hadn't worn it in 3 years. She walked toward the shelter, arms crossed against the cold. Mom. Her voice was small. What is this place? This is my land. Your land? 70 acres. I bought it when you were 19. She looked around at the river, the timber, the meadow, like she was seeing a foreign country. You bought this with money I earned sewing. Before she could respond, another car appeared. Blake's black Audi, followed by his mother Vivian's white Mercedes. They parked side by side. Blake got out first, sunglasses on despite the overcast sky. He looked worse than Jocelyn, unshaven, a stain on his shirt collar, movements jerky and agitated. Vivian emerged from her Mercedes in a camel coat and pearl earrings, surveying the property with visible disdain. What exactly are we doing in the middle of nowhere? Blake's voice was tight. Hostile. Telling the truth, I said. About what? I didn't answer. I looked at Dale, who opened his briefcase. Mr. Delacroix, Dale said calmly. My name is Dale Furman. I'm Mrs. Thibodeau's attorney. Her what? Blake laughed. The seamstress has an attorney? The seamstress, Dale continued. owns this 70-acre property valued at $2.4 million. She also owns 23 additional properties across eastern Tennessee, with a combined portfolio value of $14 million. Her total net worth, including cash and investments, is approximately $17 million. The silence that followed was complete. Even the river seemed to stop. Jocelyn's mouth opened. No words came out. Vivian's hand went to her pearls. Blake took off his sunglasses. "That's impossible," he said. "It's documented." Dale laid a summary sheet on the table. Every property acquired legally, every dollar earned through Mrs. Thibodeau's businesses and investments over 34 years. Jocelyn sat down hard on a folding chair. "Mom, 17 million? Give or take. But you charge $12 to him pants. I do. And I invest everything I don't spend. Why didn't you tell me? I wanted to see who you'd become without knowing about the money. I wanted to know if you'd respect me for who I am. A woman who works with her hands, who built something from nothing, who never once asked for recognition. And when I tried to share part of it with you, that box, that deed, you threw it on a dessert table and laughed." Jocelyn's face crumpled. "I didn't know. You didn't ask." Blake cut in, his voice rising. "This is ridiculous. You're a seamstress in Polk County. You don't have $17 million. This is some kind of scam to Mr. Delacroix." Agent Campos stepped forward, badge visible. "I'm Special Agent Richard Campos, Tennessee Bureau of Investigation." Blake went white. "We've been investigating Delacroix Heritage Partners for the past 3 weeks. We have documentation of approximately $600,000 collected from investors for a real estate fund that does not exist. That's a legitimate fund. I can explain. You can explain at our office. We have bank records showing investor deposits routed directly to your personal checking account. We have statements you sent to investors showing fabricated returns. We have testimony from 4 individuals who invested their retirement savings based on your representations." Vivian grabbed Blake's arm. "Don't say another word. I'm calling our attorney." "Mrs. Delacroix," Agent Hutchins said, "your son can certainly contact legal counsel, but the evidence is comprehensive." Blake turned on me. "You did this. You reported me. I protected people you were stealing from. You're destroying my life because my wife threw away your little wooden box." "I'm not destroying anything, Blake. You did that yourself. You stole from elderly people at your church, retirees who trusted you. A 74-year-old widow named Patricia Bowman who gave you $80,000 of her husband's life insurance. That wasn't my doing." Blake's mouth worked. No sound came out. Jocelyn stood up slowly. She looked at Blake, then at the agents, then at me. "Is it true?" she whispered to Blake. "The investors? The fake fund? Jocelyn, your mother is manipulating. Is it true?" He didn't answer. That was the answer. Jocelyn turned to me. Her face was streaked with tears. "You knew before the christening?" "I suspected. I confirmed it after. Why didn't you warn me? Would you have believed me?" She closed her eyes. We both knew the answer. Agent Campos addressed Blake formally. "Mr. Delacroix, we're asking you to come with us voluntarily for questioning. If you decline, we can return with a warrant." Blake looked at his mother. Vivian was already walking toward her car, phone pressed to her ear, heels sinking into the gravel. She didn't look back at her son. She didn't look back at her son. She didn't look back at Jocelyn. She just left. Blake watched his mother drive away. Something collapsed in his face. Not remorse, just the realization that the people who were supposed to protect him had already started protecting themselves. He went with the agents. He didn't say goodbye to Jocelyn. He didn't say goodbye to anyone. After the gray sedan disappeared down the dirt road, Jocelyn and I stood alone under the shelter. The river moved behind us. A red-tailed hawk circled above the timber line. "I threw away your gift," Jocelyn said. "You threw away a wooden box. I'm still here. I was so ashamed of you, Mom." "At the christening." "Blake's family looking at your dress, your hands." "My hands built everything you're standing on." She broke down. Not the careful, controlled crying she'd learned from the Delacroix family. Real crying. the kind that comes from somewhere deep, from the place where you keep the truths you don't want to face. I let her cry, then I sat down next to her. "What happens now?" she asked. "Blake will face charges. You're not implicated. I made sure of that. Dale has documentation proving you had no involvement. You protected me. That's what mothers do. Even after. She wiped her face with the flannel sleeve. My flannel, the one I'd sewn. "What about the trust? The $1.8 million? It's frozen. It stays frozen until you're ready. How do I become ready?" I looked out at the 70 acres, the timber I'd planted, the meadow I'd preserved, the river that had been running through this land long before I owned it and would keep running long after. You work. You learn what it means to build something with your hands instead of your last name. You stop being ashamed of where you come from and start being worthy of where you're going. I don't know how. I'll teach you, if you want to learn. I want to learn. Then show up tomorrow. 6 a.m. I've got a duplex on Cedar Street that needs new flooring. You're going to help me lay it. I don't know how to lay flooring. Neither did I in 1998. I learned from a library book. You'll learn from me. Jocelyn nodded. She stood up and looked around the property one more time. 70 acres. 70 acres. Bought with $12 hems. She almost smiled. Almost. I'll be there at 6. Don't be late. She drove away. I stood under the shelter and watched the sun drop behind the ridge. The hawk was gone. The river kept moving. 6 months later, Jocelyn had calluses on her palms. She'd helped me renovate the Cedar Street duplex, repaint 2 rental units in Cleveland, and install kitchen cabinets in a 4-plex I was converting into transitional housing for single mothers. She worked without pay. She didn't complain. She showed up at 6 every morning, and some days she stayed until dark. Blake's trial was scheduled for March. He'd been charged with 12 counts of wire fraud and 4 counts of securities fraud. Vivian Delacroix had hired an expensive attorney and hadn't spoken to Jocelyn since the day at the river. The transitional housing opened on a Saturday in April. 4 units, fully furnished, rent-free for the first year. I'd named it Thistle House, after the wild thistles that grew along the fence line of my first rental property, the ones everyone said were weeds, but I thought were beautiful. The first family to move in was a young woman named Keisha Morgan, 26, with a 3-year-old daughter. Keisha worked as a hotel housekeeper. She'd been living in her car for 4 months. Jocelyn handed her the keys. I watched from the porch. When Keisha's daughter ran inside and shouted, "Mommy, I have a room!" Jocelyn turned away so nobody would see her cry. But I saw, and I knew something had changed. That evening, Jocelyn called me. "Mom, I'm here. Thank you for not giving up on me. I never could." A pause. "I laid the flooring in Unit 3 today. By myself. Dennis checked it and said it was good work." "It is good work?" "Mom, yes, I understand now. About the box. About the deed. It was never about the land. No, it wasn't. It was about whether I could see the value of something that didn't look valuable. And, can you? Now, I'm learning. That's enough. That's all I ever wanted." I hung up and sat in my kitchen. Buttons jumped onto my lap. The sewing machine hummed in the corner. I had a wedding dress to finish by Thursday. $1,200 for the gown, my most expensive commission yet. The bride was a nurse from Chattanooga. She'd cried when she saw the beadwork. On the wall above my sewing table, I'd hung the wooden box, the one Jocelyn had tossed aside at the christening. I'd mounted it open so you could see the empty space inside where the deed used to be. A reminder. The deed was back in my lockbox now. 70 acres along the Hiwassee, worth more every year. But the box on the wall wasn't about the deed. It was about the moment my daughter decided a handmade gift from her mother was worth less than the opinion of people who didn't love her. She was learning better now. My house is still 1,200 square feet. I still drive the Civic. I still charge $12 to hem a pair of pants, though Dale keeps telling me I should raise my prices. I still wake at 5 and go to bed at 9. Button still sleeps on my pillow. But now, 4 families live in Thistle House because a seamstress in Polk County decided that wealth means nothing if it doesn't serve someone. And my daughter lays flooring with her own hands and understands, finally, that the woman who sewed patches on her jeans wasn't an embarrassment. She was the foundation. The wooden box wasn't trash, it was a test. And Jocelyn failed it. But failure isn't the end of the story. Sometimes it's the beginning. Sometimes you have to watch everything you thought mattered fall apart before you can see what actually does. If you've ever been underestimated because of your work, if someone looked at your hands, your clothes, your job title, and decided you weren't worth their respect, I want you to hear this. Your labor has dignity. Every stitch, every floor you mopped, every late shift you worked while the world slept, that is your empire. And nobody can throw it in a fountain or toss it on a dessert table. It's yours. Share this story with someone who needs to hear that. Subscribe to Topaz Revenge for more stories about ordinary people who refuse to be invisible. Leave a comment. Tell me, have you ever been judged by your title instead of your character? I read every one. Thank you for staying until the end. Your time matters, and I'm honored you spent it here. Some details in this story are fictionalized for storytelling purposes. If this isn't your kind of content, no hard feelings. There's something for everyone. But if it hit home, stick around. There's more coming. And remember, $12 hems built an empire. Don't ever let anyone tell you your work doesn't count.